Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of Vacations. Icon of the Seas. Arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Well, this sucks. Hey everybody, I'd like to welcome you all to another episode of the Focus Hunting Podcast. The Focus Hunting Podcast is part of the Waypoint Outdoor Collective. For more information on Waypoint, make sure you head on over to waypointtv.com. Okay, for this episode, I got quite a unique character on the show, Charlie Beaty. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Charles, he also goes by the handle Prince of Poachers. Charles, he had quite the run as an outlaw, and illegally took over 116 trophy class whitetail deer from private land. So, yeah, it's quite the story, and in no way, shape, or form am I condoning or promoting being an outlaw or poaching or doing anything illegal, anything like that. I just came across the story and I just had to share it with you guys. So I hope you guys like this, and it might offend some people. For those it does, sorry, but it's just it's one of those things that happened. It is what it is, and Charlie, he paid his debt to society. So now he's got a book telling about it. So anyway, I hope you guys like this episode. Before we get going, we got a giveaway here. Charlie hooked us up with a couple books, so I'm going to throw in some focus swag. So just go over to my Instagram page, and you're going to see the details of that giveaway. So yeah, just make sure you head on over to focus_hunting, and you'll see that giveaway. Yeah, and as always, hunting season, it's starting to get close to wrapping up here for deer season up here in British Columbia and other parts of Canada and the U.S. So, let me know how you guys' hunting's going. DM me or email me. I'd love to hear about that. And I got a bunch of extra swag from my supplier I'd love to ship out to you guys. So just let me know how it's going. And as always, like and subscribe to the show. 5-star ratings help. Anyway, I hope you guys like this episode. So anyway, thanks for jumping on the podcast, man. I know it's not easy for you to get these things going. You gotta go a bit to get cell phone service, so I appreciate that.
It should be all right today, though. I think we're gonna be okay.
So where are we hitting you up from today?
Well, I'm right here just northwest of Glen Rose, Texas. Southwest of Fort Worth, some 50 miles.
What's the weather like down in Texas?
Perfect today. Just beautiful.
Is it? Yeah, it's
yeah.
We're getting dumped with a blanket of snow today, so
really
good day to be doing a podcast. Yeah, yeah. So for those who don't recognize the voice, I'm talking to Charlie Beaty, aka the Prince of Poachers. Some folks listen to this, they might think that we're going to be promoting poaching and outlaws. And everyone seems to be really sensitive these days. So, if this offends anyone, then just turn it off, right, Charles?
Yeah. It's just
you go by Chuck or Charles?
Yeah, Charlie.
Charlie?
Yeah, everybody's got a past, and that was mine. I've been a poacher for over 23 years now.
Retired poacher.
Yeah, ex-outlaw deer hunter.
Yeah. So where did you get the handle Prince of Poachers?
Oh, there's a little story behind that. I had a journalist working with me on the idea of writing a book about it one day, and he asked me, did I have any nicknames of any sort, and anybody call me anything different than my name? And I said, well, I had a title as King of the Kennedy Ranch for a good while, but I said, one day I was sitting up on a sand dune and I was contemplating that, and I said, you'd have to be the one that killed the biggest deer ever come out of that county to be the king. I said, there's got to be a little outlaw royalty here somewhere. And I said, what's the next in the chain of command? So I said, well, I guess that has to be the Prince. And this journalist come out of his shoes. He goes, that's it. That will be the name of the book, Prince of Poachers. Well, I made up my mind finally when I got around to doing the book that should be the name, but for more than one reason. Part two is going to explain the other half. It's sort of a two-sided, meaning, implication to that title. So, everyone will have something to keep them curious about until part two's up. If they take an interest in my story and get the book.
How long were you sitting on the idea of writing a book before you actually got pen to paper?
Only about 3 or 4 years. 3, I believe. What happened was I wrote it, the part 1. And then I became deathly ill with skin cancer and like to die. Didn't think none of it would ever happen. About 9 years in, I was almost dead. Got the right doctor. Now I'm 9 years plus in recovery, and I'm clearly going to get well. I'm still very damaged. I'm damaged goods. I'm beat up. I'm weak. Most women could probably beat me arm wrestling now, but, I was real strong when it hit me. It just ate me. But I'll rehab soon and see how much I've got left to build back. But I'm almost over all the healing processes and, the damage it did to my skin and all, and it's come up from down deep too. So I'm about well.
Yeah,
and, I sat on the part 1 for 15 years, written and typed, and couldn't come forward with it. Then all of a sudden, my dad, about 4 years ago, before he passed away, he wanted to help me get it launched, and he got the money to kick it off. And I lost him last February to COVID, but without him, it would have never happened. He kept me positive thinking throughout the battle for my life with the skin cancer. I wouldn't have made it through it without his support. And, when it boiled down to it, I had to come off a deathbed sort of situation and write the final chapter. I went ahead and stuck the conclusion on part 1 so people will have some kind of idea how the story ended to a degree, but there's much more coming in part 2. There's, 9 more years and 75 more big deer, and, part 1 only covered the first 7 years, and 41 outlaw bucks, and, many hunts with friends and people you wouldn't think would ever go and risk it. In fact, what got me back to it after a rough divorce when I had quit for 6 years, a police officer that was a taxidermy customer, I trusted him enough to didn't think it was a setup, or nothing, but he got me to take him just because he'd never killed a big deer. And I didn't have anything to lose at that point. I went through a world record divorce, and so I didn't have any reason to stay out of jail if it come to that. So we went. And then the next week I took his best friend, partner, another cop. The 2 police officers are the ones that got me kicked off back into it. And then it just went hog wild again. And, I had a vendetta against the state of Texas. They got involved in my divorce and believed lies on me. Gave custody of my son to my ex-wife, and she ran away to, Missouri with a banker. I didn't see my son again for 19 years. So during that time, I got angry, and I was the longer he'd been out of my life, the madder I got. And more deer I left laying dead. And I even got vindictive and started dragging carcasses out in roads to torment the game wardens and, the ranch. I was just lashing back at the injustice that had been done to me in the state here. And, I still got a bone to pick coming in part 2. I get my vindication. I get to tell my side of the story and how I was victimized, criminal injustice against me, and the state was involved in it. They had no right to give her custody of my son. But that's what drove me back to it. And then my arrest and capture came in 1998 at the end of a long season. I was set up. I didn't think that was going to happen, but this old commercial fisherman, drug addict, he was up on parole violations, going to go back to prison. And he set me up. He talked me into letting him take me across the Baffin Bay and drop me off on the shore there, on the north shore of the Kennedy Ranch. I'd been tired from a long season. I thought, well, it'd be nice to take about an 18-mile ride in there to the depths this time and then bail and hunt my way casually all the way back out of the county. I was just going to walk out of the county back to my truck. Well, they got on my trail. They picked up my tracks the 3rd morning, and then they tracked me 17 miles before they caught up with me. But, there's a lot to that part of the story. But, that's how it ended. The next year here in Texas, outlaw hunting, without consent of landowner became a felony. It was still a Class A misdemeanor when I was caught, so I was charged and given probation, suspension of 18 months on hunting and fishing both. Well, the next year while I was on probation, it became a felony. I would have quit at that point anyway. It was never worth going to prison for me. I'd already done so much of it. I was tired of it anyway, and I was 41 when I was caught. I'm 65 now. I certainly have no intentions of risking anything that would carry a prison sentence. If I was, it'd be an armored car full of cash, 3 or 4 million cash, before I'd go after another big deer.
Yeah, something a little more advantageous, I guess.
Yeah, if you're going to risk prison, go all the way, go big time, or go home. I mean, I wouldn't risk 10 years in the pen over a deer. You do the same time for robbing an armored car. So, do the math.
So you said you're sitting on the book for a while and you couldn't release it. Was that just financial reasons, or you were just afraid of what people would think about it?
Mostly I was just deathly ill. Yeah, I just couldn't complete write. I was intending to write the whole thing in one piece. So at that point, I looked at it like, I can't write the second half. I'm at a standstill. So at that point, I began to think, this ain't ever even going to happen. I'm not worried about it. I'm trying to survive. You lose focus on something like that. That's secondary. You're trying to save your own life. Then you forget all the other nonsense. I didn't know that I would ever put a pen to it again, for that length of time. And then when my dad got me off my deathbed, said, I'll finance it if you'll, get up and write the final chapter and tack that on there where people can have a look at how the story ends. And I said, yeah, I feel like that's crucial. I can fill in the interim later and the last 9 years and have a part 2. I had some dreams that made me believe that it needed to be in part 1 and part 2 at that point, and I thought, that's what I feel I'm supposed to do. So we got part 1 out, and now I'm still kind of finish up getting well mode for the last 4 years, and I'm fixing to get really serious and complete part 2. I've got to start on it. I just hadn't felt good enough to complete it. I'm having to run my book sales now by myself after letting the manager go. I've had to let 2 go for, they couldn't keep honest with me. They couldn't keep their hands off the money, and so now I'm having to ship all my own books and setting up a new office, and that's just one more of the delays that I've been faced with. It's keeping me from part 2, but it's inevitable. I'm going to have it in the next 3 to 4 months max. There's no way around that. I have to get it done. Coming in part 2, I've got a tremendous testimony for God out of all of this, and it's a real shocker. Nobody's going to see it coming. Not from me, they won't. They'll think, where'd this come from? Because right now it's camouflaged with the story. And the storyline is just kind of the bad is the stink bait to get a large audience. And then I'm going to come out with what I've had, in my spiritual life and some supernatural experiences that are just really going to shock people. I mean, it's really going to be shocking. That's the only word to use for it. They're not going to expect this.
Yeah, I look forward to it anyway. Maybe Netflix will make a movie out of it. Hey?
I've had a phone call of, one little offer already. They're looking into it, but I didn't expect something like that until part 2's out. But it would make a series. The story's so long that it would have to go into some kind of series. I don't see how they could compact that in 2 hours. You'd have to be God to, put that in a sardine can. That journalist that interviewed me once, he said, how much material have you got? I'm not sure you got enough, maybe you got a book in you. And I said, probably enough to fill a full set of volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica. And he goes, really? And I said, pretty close. And he, as he unfolded my story more and more when he was with me for a while, it didn't work out between me and him, but he saw that. He goes, you really do have a book in you. He said, this is just really incredible how much you've got. And I said, yeah, it's endless. And it is. I mean, the material coming in part 2 is probably 3 times what's in part 1. That's how big it is. It's a project. I'm going to have to really get to writing.
So is it going to cover some of the same material, or is it going to be something completely new and just kind of finish off?
All new.
All new?
All new. I go to church for 6 years, get married to a church pianist, had that bad divorce, went back to 9 more years of poaching, 75 more big deer. I had people, world-renowned hunting guides go with me, people you wouldn't think would risk it all. Risk ruining their reputation and their livelihood, and I had other people from backgrounds that you wouldn't believe would risk it all either. And the stories, but while I wasn't hunting, some of my outlaw buddies continued. Some of those stories are so unbelievable. You know, they got to go in the book. That's what I call the interim. I mean, their stories, a couple of outlaw friends, you know, George Moore, my big outlaw hunting buddy down there, and then Dennis Music. George is dead now, but Dennis was notorious from being up in Wise County all his life, and then me and him met up. We became, you know, duels and crime, whatever you call it, partners in crime. I took him down there and showed it to him. It's like one game warden said while I was going to church and quit poaching 6 years, he told my old taxidermy boss, he said, "What's Charlie doing?" He goes, "He's not hunting anymore, Ronnie." He said, "Yeah, but he took that darn Dennis Music down there and showed that ranch to him, and he said he'll hunt that ranch till the day he dies." So they had a grudge on me for showing it to him. But, you know, me and Dennis and George were the three most wanted down there. You know, George had a heart attack and died about 9 years ago, but Dennis is still living, but he's beat up too from health problems. He's not doing any more outlaw hunting. I think he's got a big yellow stripe up his back like me. You know, he's too old to spend any time in prison. You know, we just don't figure it's worth it anymore.
Yeah. Do you hunt still?
I don't. Do what?
Do you hunt still?
I would love to. I did some guiding from about, after I got off my probation, I returned to this area here. I used to live in Glen Rose in the 91, 92 range, and then I moved away from here, and I came back to the Glen Rose area, and I met a girl, and her uncle owned a game ranch at Walnut Springs, south of Glen Rose, 12 miles, and named Tom Hartzell, and met Ted Nugent hunting there, and guided him, and we had a couple of celebrity hunts with him, playing for all the hunters that came, and called it the Stroke Fest for bow hunting only, you know. And that place was like 1,800 acres and had, you know, exotics and whitetail bows and, you know, good times. But I didn't call that serious hunting. I chased down some cripples now and then that was kind of entertaining. But, boys, as 2003 and 4 got there, I began to get really ill. And I just was barely able to help him fill any feeders occasionally and set some hunters out and sit with them, and it just finally came to a point I didn't go anymore at all. I just couldn't go down there. I didn't have the strength.
Yeah, I bet. Well, it takes a lot out of you. It's glad to see you're on the road to recovery. Yeah. I'm ready. I hope I get my strength back where I'll feel good when I'm hunting again. But I intend to return to hunting, and I'm back in touch with my son. I've known him about 8 or 9 years now, and I feel sorry for all the shit he's going to kill when I get some resources to pay for it, because he's got a lot of catching up to do. He served in Afghanistan. He was a Marine 4 years. And, he's just never killed a good buck. I'm trying to get him a good hunt going this season, some sort. You got to break his cherry. He needs to kill a big one. Yeah, he needs to come up
to one of them rattled up
to Canada and hit Saskatchewan for a big old whitetail.
Exactly.
Big buggers out there.
Yeah, they're monsters. I saw a video years ago. They went inside a taxidermy in the middle of the season. I could not believe the mass on all those bucks that were in that taxidermy being mounted. I mean, these were some 300-inch deer and incredible mass. I didn't even know that kind of mass existed anywhere. But that's always been a dream of mine to hunt Canada. Maybe now,
Yeah. Keep selling that book, and we'll get you up here.
There you go.
You're a born and raised Texan, am I right?
Yeah. I was born in East Texas in Tyler, raised in Arlington, about dead middle of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Graduated high school there. And within a couple of years, I got a job offer to go to Kingsville down there in South Texas. It's what took me right into the heart of the King Ranch. I went down there with that as my purpose. This professor, marketing management professor at the A&I University, he sold Bob White quail mounted under glass and in furniture and all. And he stopped at a gas station and met my brother, and my brother saw something that he had and laughed at him. And he said, "What's the matter? Ain't you ever seen mounted quail?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "My brother mounted quail to make them look like shit." Well, he called me, came to see me while I was working in a shop there in Fort Worth. And after a few visits, mounting a number of birds for him, he, made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I mean, that's back in 76, 77.
And it amounted to me I could mount one an hour of those pen raised quail, not having to wash and dry them. And it was like a $25 an hour job. And back then that was quite a bit of money, so I'd make 1,000 or 1,200 a week just playing. And then I only worked about 6 months out of the year and hunt and fish the rest. When I got down there, it didn't work out with the politics on the King Ranch. And he tried, but he couldn't get me influenced enough to, in with the right clean circles. And so I got talked in by all the outlaws locally to jump in the fence. And once I went, I got addicted real quick to seeing them big bucks running a rattle, running right in on top of it. Just like heroin to me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there was no turning back. But I had a close call in the King Ranch on a cattle roundup. It was, stove up and hid in the cactus for about 4.5 hours, and that scared me out of the King Ranch. I did hit it at night a couple of times with my buddy George and all, in and out before daylight and all. But that King Ranch is mostly grassland and mesquite, and you can't hide. If they've seen you, they run you down on a horse. But I met a man in the taxidermy there that owned a section of land in the middle of the Kennedy Ranch, one county south, and it was a totally unhunted ranch at that time. And he took me on some taxidermy crate hunts, and we just jump his fence and go any direction we wanted. We were hunting the whole county from the middle of it out. It's a bird nest on the ground. And years later, when he had died, been killed, well, I went back to it, after that divorce, and I just walked from the highway or take a boat ride off the bay. And I went on some really long hunts. I would stay 11, 16, stayed 27 days one time by myself. I didn't want to come out. I wanted to stay there. In fact, it's one of the police officers that I had taken the first year back to it. My buddy Big L went by there worried about me 3 weeks into the hunt. He said, "You think we need to call down there and see if he's, in jail or anything?" And he said, "No, they'll give him a call if he's been caught." He said, "By now, Charlie's either dead or he's having the time of his life." He was right. I didn't want to come out. I was having the time of my life. And on the last day, I stayed at the road the whole day in a little live oak mott. I got bored. I was out of everything, but the only thing I had left was white gas. I could have rendered some grease out of hog fat, but I was really famished. I'd already lost 26 pounds on that hunt. I found out when I got out, but I wanted to break the boredom. So I had two bundles of 3 bucks in each bundle. So I pulled my backpack straps off and I pulled them bundles apart. And when I did, they just went boosh. And a big 10-point jump right in my lap, kaboosh, kaboosh, and just pointed me like a bird dog on quail. I mean, at that point, I really got mad. I was like, I'm going to go back to the brush and stay another week. I didn't want to come out at all. And I had that set up with my ride man where if I wasn't at the highway that night, the night of the 23rd of December, that he would come back 1 week later. And so I knew he would just blow it off and come back in a week. And I thought, I'm going back. And I said, I can't do it. I don't have any carbohydrates. I'm famished. And I was out of tobacco, too, out of chewing tobacco. And I said, I've got to come out. So, I didn't want to, but I did. I came on out after that 27 days. But
that was
my longest hunt.
Yeah. So what do you pack in on these hunts? Do you have to pack water in? And you said carbohydrates.
No. In the Kennedy, one of the most beautiful things about it was probably the windmills. They were, 2 to 3 miles, 4 miles apart in places, and they all had pure water. And you catch a breeze, you could go there by yourself at night and get water. And, if you had no breeze, I've tied jugs to the pipe with strapping tape, climb the windmill and fan the blade. I've had buddies stand down there and hold the jugs while I fan the blade, climb the top of the windmill. I had one crazy event happen when I was on that 27-day hunt. No, it wasn't on the 27-day hunt. This was with a buddy that went on a 7-day hunt, and he crippled his leg up. And he was going to rest in this one camp I had near this windmill, and so I said, I'm going to go get all the water I can get, and I'll be back in a minute. And we had a cold front blowing hard out of the north. So I went over there to that windmill to get all the water I could and water him down good before I left for a 3-day hunt up north of there and hit another camp that I had. So I get over there, and the water the overflow valve had gotten completely plugged up, and the water came all the way to the top of the tank. So I couldn't get pure water coming out of that pipe. And so I go, well, I've got to clean that overflow, and it wasn't going down very fast. That wind blowing real hard. That windmill was matching about the speed of the drain off on the overflow. And I said, I got to get out here, get away from this windmill. I can't wait here all day. So I climbed over. I went over there and pulled the brake first. I pulled down on that brake handle, and the wire just snapped when I put all the weight on it. So I said, well, I'm going to climb the windmill, ride the sucker rod, and just hang on it until that water overflow catches up with the flow that would have been pumping. And I ride up and down on that sucker rod about 3 beats, bang, those 2 bolts broke out of the joint up there at the top. Well, then the windmill just started spinning like a drill. I said, now what am I going to do? So I I was falling. I caught myself on the rail and climbed down. And I sat there and was waiting, watching the water level drop down, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I said, well, I'll find me a piece of wire. I might can fix it. So I did. I went over around the windmill trap there, and I found a 4-foot piece of 9-gauge wire, and I made me a staple out of it. It was a little longer on one end than the other. That was perfect. And I got up there on that windmill, and I could have seen anybody driving up for quite a distance, that tall up. So I wasn't too worried about somebody driving in there on me. So I got up there and I pulled that sucker rod back up there and matched that point where that joint stalled momentarily before it went back up. So I got one wire in it, and then I timed it just right. When it hit that stall again, I nailed the other hole with the other end of that wire and shoved that whole staple through 2 feet, jumped out there on it after I bent it over and twisted it into a tie knot, and I got it running again. So I fixed the windmill. So then I went back down, and I was sitting there waiting for the water overflow to catch up. I had my back to this live oak tree right outside the windmill trap, and all of a sudden I see this female coyote. It's real trim, pretty, looked like a fox first. And then I said, no, it's a female coyote. And she looked at me, and then she looked over her shoulder, and she took off, coming right at me. Well, bang, 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 bang. Here comes 6 more big males right behind her. They were breeding her. She's coming straight at me, and they were too, and it hit me. I was looking at this hole in this, game trail, a hole under the fence there right in front of me, just spitting distance, and I went, oh, no, they're coming through that hole. And every one of them came through that hole. Every one of them cut their eyes at me. I could have spit on every one of them. I don't know what I'd have done if they'd have turned on me, but they just glanced at me and shoot on through chasing that female. And, man, that did it. I was wired for 220 then. I said, now I'm going out there and get all the water jugs filled. So I got out there and filled up all my jugs, brushed my tracks, and I went back over to Richard in my camp, and I said, I got a story to tell you before I leave. And when I told him what happened, he goes, you're a crazy motherfucker, turkey. Now, I had to get that water there. It was 2 more miles to any other windmill. Didn't have time to pack water to him.
Wow.
But I forgot one part. I had to go back up and untwist that wire and pull it, because if the rancher security, came and found that, fixed like that, they'd have known somebody been there. So I just dismissed the wire. I twisted up around it, threw it off to the side in case they ever needed it again. And that way they didn't know anybody been there. That looked like to them probably that the boat's just corroded and snapped all of a sudden under that high wind.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to kind of cover my trail.
Yeah.
They would have been looking for me otherwise.
So to give some perspective on the size of these ranches we're talking about, now the Kennedy Ranch is 235,000 square acres. And
no, that's not correct. Now, the total amount of the Kennedy Ranch is 440,000.
Oh, okay.
But there's around 100,000 on the west side of Highway 77. Until recently, I didn't even know what it was shaped like. I felt like and was told it was a narrow strip, and it was. It's about a mile plus deep for a good ways, most of the county. But down in that southwest corner, there's a big old square of the Kennedy there called, it's more the Holy Land. And it was designated along with the rest to never be hunted. Well, once the Catholic Church got the ranch after Miss Old Lady Kennedy died, they started opening up the hunting. That place, the whole ranch, was never to be hunted. It's all considered holy land. Well, I'm sure she rolled over in her grave. But anyway, I hunted the east side only. Between US 77 and the Laguna Madre and Baffin Bay on the north side, there was probably over 300,000, if not a little less. But I hunted probably a couple of 100,000 of it for the most part, because I didn't like hunting any quicker than 10 or 12 miles deep, and then I would hunt from their back. but I hunted north to south, probably a total of 15 to 18 miles. There was, brush bars down in the southern part that I hunted and killed quite a few good deer out of. I basically hunted the whole east side of the ranch.
It's lots of ground to cover. Tons of ground to cover.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be like them looking for one man between Dallas and Fort Worth, and then that far to the north and that far back west and then back south. It's that big a piece of property, and it's mostly solid live oak. There's some prairie heartland out in the middle, some sand dune country and stuff, mesquite and all mixed with the live oaks, but it's enormous. It's got the canopy of the live oak for the most part, to where finding somebody even out of a helicopter or something with a search like that is just fruitless. It's just in vain. They're not going to catch you out of a helicopter with you camoed out. You hear them, you get in a brush pile. They're not going to find you. Hold up,
Yeah, and the King Ranch is what, double in size of that one?
Yeah, at least it's like close to 900,000 still, I think. That's what we've been told. But, tracking in the Kennedy was usually no problem. The loose, dry sand would just fall back in your tracks, and so much game, they'd beat your tracks up real quick. But when I got caught, it had been raining 3 days, and the sand was just like making a perfect imprint, a mutilage of your boot track. So they had that advantage. And in the high wind, it was real windy. That kept me from hearing them. I didn't hear any vehicles in that area. There were some in there. I didn't hear them. Had I heard pressure, I would have moved, and they wouldn't have caught me when they did.
So now, do they have guys? Do they have guys that are just out looking for poachers? That's their job.
Absolutely. They've got trackers working both those ranches all the time. I mean, they basically guard the perimeter till they get on a set of tracks. And they'll go, deep as they have to. They'll stay on those tracks for days. There's actually a worse ranch about that to the west, which is harder to not leave tracks. They'll put a lantern up. They'll stay on you all night. They'll come after you like they did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They will not let up. They'll catch you the next day, the next night after that. They'll stay on that trail till they catch you. The name of that ranch in Jim Hall County is the Robert East, and they've busted so many people trying to go in there and kill them Boone and Crockett deer. It's not even funny. They catch almost all of them.
Yeah.
I've been in there. I don't want to go back. I made up my mind before I got caught to never go back to that ranch. We were pinned down in it.
So outside of these ranches, what kind of hunting opportunities are there in Texas?
Anything under the sun. We've got so many exotic ranches now, stocked, and the whitetails have been imported from all over the country and crossbred, thoroughbred. They're multi-point 300-plus inch deer. I just don't care to shoot anything behind a high fence like that. I've never had any desire to do that, but there's a market for it. People pay it. People pay ridiculous amounts. Lately, it's gotten so overstocked. They run specials. They'll sell you a 200-plus inch deer for about $2,500 in some places to kill them before they die of old age, and they don't get anything for them.
Yeah. I heard you say before that the true Texas whitetails are all dead.
It's just about over. The King and Kennedy Ranch is a stronghold of them. There's brush country over there south of Freer, all the way down in the from Laredo and stuff across. There's still native herds. There's native deer out west to extreme west Texas where the whitetails end and the mule deer take over. But by and large, all these high fence deer, they escape all the time. They brought them into so many areas, and they brought so many of them in. While their horns are dropped, shed, they'll go through water gaps. They'll get out of weak spots in the fence, and then there's free-range places nearby, and they just scattered everywhere and crossbred everything. And the true beautiful whitetails that Texas always had have been polluted. They've been crossbred. They're not the same body. They're not the same horns. You see all those white horns that you used to see only up north. They're in the area now. That just used to never see nothing in Texas white horned. They all had good color, red, orange, chocolate, maroon, they all had good horn color and beautiful design. Now you get a lot of these old massive round tines with no bladed diamond shaped character at any of their points. And they're just big, ugly battle oxes is what I call them. I don't care anything about killing them kind of deer, but, I don't know. There's no way back. Just like the Palo Duro Canyon up in the Amarillo area, they brought in those aoudad. Well, there's no way they can eradicate them now. They didn't expect them to do that good, and they just took off like a bottle rocket. Well, now they would like to get them out and replace them with bighorn because they feel like the bighorn would have done great. It's too late. There's no way they'll ever exterminate those aoudad now. I mean, there's about a 150-mile stretch of that canyon or more that they're in, and they just took it over.
Yeah. Once, some species, once they get into an area, that's it. It's just like those wild hogs. They're pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, they've took over Texas. They're starting to fight back. They've got all these helicopter hunts now. So in any open terrain where they can work on them good, they hammer them.
Yeah.
Like, you pay for the hunt $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, and you and a buddy can go and just, shoot the piss out of them hogs. They'll run you right down on them. Open fire at will, But I imagine that's a lot of fun. I wouldn't mind doing that someday just for the fun of it.
Yeah, they're even starting to see those wild hogs up here in Canada now. So.
Really?
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah, they kind of.
Yeah, there was an old man that owned the Kennedy Ranch before he died. He was Rita Kennedy's son, I believe, some marital son or something. Anyway, he was in charge of it. He and his son were given lifetime grazing rights. And Tom would hear me shoot, and he'd come in there the next day on a predator roundup and try to catch me while he had 5 or 6, 7 helicopters in the air. And it was pretty nerve-wracking. I just had to stay holed up in the brush pile all day, and they'd be popping buckshot down through that air under them blades, and I mean, just
trying to scare you out
all day long. And they blew the leaves off my hair several times, and every time they did, I just covered my head back up with more leaves and sand. I didn't want to be there that day, but I had 2 big heads on the backpack I'd already killed the morning before. I believe that's why they called that predator roundup. They pulled a Jeep near me after popping them 2 shots. About 400 yards apart, I doubled, killed 2 good bucks. And so I would look at those deer for a minute, and I used to smoke weed, and I'd toke a little to calm my nerves and look at my racks, and then here would come another helicopter beelining me, and I'd have to bury my heads and roll over and face down in the dirt again while they passed by me in them helicopters. But it wasn't fun at all. My buddy George had seen them going in that morning at daylight when he come off a rig at daylight and was going back home, and he went to my house, and he told my girlfriend Betty, he said, "Charlie hunting?" She said, "Well, I'm not going to say." He goes, "Well, if he's hunting down there, he better get ready." He said, "I just saw Tom East pull 5 helicopters into Lower Kennedy."
It's amazing that they throw that. It's amazing they throw that many resources at one guy just killing killing a few deer.
Yeah, and it wasn't about the penalty. It wasn't that I was committing murder, but that Tom East man, he was crazy about those deer. He wouldn't let his own mother shoot one of them. He wanted them to stay left alone. And so the thought of somebody killing them would drive him crazy. And he was rich. He could write a check for $200 million. So the money was just pocket change putting up that many helicopters. But, he just couldn't stand the thought of somebody killing them big deer.
He wanted them all for himself.
He just wanted them to be left alone. I'll tell you how he really felt. This buddy of mine, Pat Lane's coming out with his book. It's out now. It's called Before the Stories Are Lost. And Pat knew him. Pat and his stepdad, Wayne Hornsby, they had a welding shop at South Furious, and Tom would come in there and have him do work. Well, one of the foremen to Tom's ranch came in with these big shed horns one time and gave them to Wayne, and Wayne screwed them on a plaque and stuck them up there like a plaque mount, on the wall. He'd come in, he said, "Where'd you get them horns?" And he said, "Your foreman so-and-so gave them to me." He said, Wayne didn't think it was a big deal. He goes, "That's what I thought. I thought those come off my ranch." He said, "Get them down." He got them down and took them. He went back and fired the foreman that gave them to Wayne and took them off the plaque they were screwed on and threw them both out in the pasture.
Shed antlers.
That's how crazy about them he was.
Wow. So how many deer did you take off his ranch?
Between me and all the friends I took, we brought out a total of 116 trophy deer in those, 22-year span that I did all that.
116 trophy. Those are trophy deer. That's not including. Now you guys are shooting deer while you're out there just to eat, weren't you?
Sometimes if we didn't have a kill going on, we would take some meat. I know I did a lot on the long hunts, but I tried to kill the hogs because I'd rather eat them because they put more energy back in me. Eating those small hogs, take the top of the hams off and, marble in fat, that give you good energy. That puts something back in you. At the last 3 or 4 years, I went really like high tech on a lot of things plus my food. I'd take freeze-dry mashed potatoes, instant potatoes in there, and boy, at the end of a long day, heat up some water, make them hot potatoes, and squeeze that parquet butter out on them. That would make you sleep good. You'd wake up feeling rested the next day. But I ate, like a king. I liked eating the hearts, the livers, the underloins, and of course backstrap. But on the hogs, that ham couldn't be beat. The backstraps were too lean; they wouldn't do nothing for you. You eat them hams on a 40, 50-pound hog. That'd put something back in you. The next day, you were ready to hunt.
Yeah. I mean, it's a 10 to 20 day hunt on itself takes a lot out of a guy. Never mind trying to run from ranchers and lawmen.
Yeah, it's a marathon. It's an endurance challenge. It's sort of like these triathlon deals. Like I said, I went in there at 194 and come out 26 pounds lighter 27 days later. So that's how fast you burn everything in you.
Yeah. How many hunts did you like? What was your regular hunting season?
Oh, I like to start right at the 1st of December, and I like to hunt hard those first 3 weeks. And occasionally, just about the turn of the year, I'd go over west in the brush and hunt the first, second week of January in Dimmitt County, where a lot of the book deer are, and that heavy cactus country. And that's a different hunt entirely. Those deer are so smart, and they come in downwind 70, 80, 90 yards downwind, and you got to take a partner with you, and you got to put them 50 to 60 yards downwind to you. For example, the first time I went, took this buddy of mine, I told him, you go at least 50 yards downwind, just do downwind and look downwind. Look both sides of it, but look downwind because they're going to come in below that. These deer are smart. The big ones are real smart. He counted 48 bucks. I saw one of them first day. I rattled 48 deer to him. I only saw one. It came blowing by me from upwind to me and just blew by me and screeched to a halt 5 yards past me when he winded me. And his tail came up and started quivering and shaking. He was a good heavy 155-inch 10-point. And then he just exploded out of there. He like came out of his skin when he took off. And I asked my buddy, I said, did you see that one blowing out of there? And he goes, yeah. And I said, yeah. He stopped right on me and then burned off. And, so he saw 48 to my one because he was 50, 60 yards downwind of me. And most of the deer he saw came in downwind of him. So that's how smart they are in that cactus country. You got to have a hunting partner. You can't see 20, 30 yards in most places. So you got to separate like that.
Did you guys move around lots? Like you must have been scared that these ranchers or cowboys are going to hear your gunshots.
Well, what happened was in my latter years, I developed these mop bottom boots. I took parachute cord, drilled 10 holes in my combat boots, and sewed with a wire needle and parachute cord. I sewed these mop replacement heads on the bottom of my combat boots, and I was track free then. So we could we relaxed then. We're like, there's no way they can track us. So we weren't sweating it. We had a little consideration for maybe rattling someone to us with the antlers. But, you can hear in that heavy brush, you hear something coming to you. In fact, my buddy George, he heard brush breaking like that once and threw his gun up and thought it was going to be a big buck come out. And it was a deputy game warden and a ranch security, and they threw down on him with what looked like automatic weapons. Drop the gun. He said, I'm just a hunter. Drop the gun. Well, they caught him on his first rattle, but he wasn't using any track-free mops on his boots or nothing, so they were tracking right to him.
Oh, did you ever worry about any of these guys you're hunting with ratting you out?
Well, the cops, when I first took them, I thought, no, this might be a setup, but then I just let it fly. I just let it roll, and it was okay. They were not setting me up, and they'd never killed a big deer, tired of all the high prices, and they were disgruntled about, paying places, and they're all shot out and no deer. and they'd go home empty again, and they were just ready to end their search and get them one. They wanted to go one time for one big trophy buck, fulfill the dream, and they were never going to go again. That was a promise one made to his wife and the other one to his girlfriend. But when I got set up at the end, that guy, he fooled me. I thought, this guy's the last person that would help the law. I didn't know he'd been tested positive for dope, was fixed to be, revoked and sent back to prison. But he's just an alcoholic, drug addict, beach rat, commercial outlaw fisherman. I had no clue he was going to set me up.
Mm. So how old were you?
I wouldn't have went.
How old were you when you killed your first illegal deer?
19.
19.
Yeah,
so
I shot my first illegal deer, though, in Louisiana in a tree stand with my first father-in-law. I had no license, so that's what made it illegal. But it was just a little 4-point. But I didn't know much more about it for another 2 years or so. And then I moved to South Texas, and it just blew wide open for me within a year of being down there. I mean, within a couple of seasons, I shot Big John, my biggest deer ever, extremely massive, and, rattled up a 178-inch scarecrow for my buddy George, and we just started hammering big heads in the mid-170s over and over, It just got ridiculous. I killed a double drop. I've shot them with nearly every shape they come in, In fact, I was in East Texas while I was quitting poaching, going to church, and I ran into these 5 guys from Houston after I'd rattled up a little 8-point, and the guy shot it right out from under me, and I gutted it for him, and went on down about 3 miles down the creek and hit a fence, big sign on it, posted, and I looked and read the sign, and I turned to walk away, and this old man come out from behind that great big tree trunk. He said, "Yeah, that's right. You better not come over here. I got a gun." Well, I was getting pretty angry by then about the whole situation, shots being fired all day long. And I said, "Oh, man, don't start talking tough to me. I got a gun, too." And he said, "Well, I'm sorry." I said, "Well, I ain't got time to hear it." So I went up the hill, and I found some good sign, and rattled up 2 hunters with their guns on their shoulders pointing right at me. And I said, "Hey!" They said, "Man, we thought you were 2 bucks fighting." I said, "I know what you thought." I just got up and got out of there, and I ran into these 5 guys from Houston on 4-wheelers. And they were sitting around drinking beer, smoking weed. So, when in Rome, do what the Romans do. So they telling their buck stories and pulling little pictures of cool 8-points out of their wallets and showing them around. And they were proud of them. That was real great, I didn't say nothing. And finally they looked at me and they said, "Well?" I said, "Well, what?" And they said, "You ever kill any big deer?" I said, "I guess you could say I've killed some big deer." I said, "I've shot them with double drops, double forks, double handlebars, 25-inch spreads, 20 points, massive horns." I said, "I guess you could say I've killed one in about every shape they come in." And they were looking at each other like, "This guy's a nut." And so, "Got any pictures?" No, I don't got any pictures. "Where'd you kill them?" "Down on the King Ranch, Kennedy Ranch." "Really?" "Yeah, I used to be a big poacher down there, and I'm not anymore. But and you ain't got no pictures?" I said, "No." Well, I told them about rattling up that 8-point buck for that guy that morning, and they didn't believe that either. "Let me see the blood on your hands." Well, I'd washed my hands in the, flooded Boggy Creek area down there. So they didn't believe that. Well, they said, "We'll give you a ride back to your camp." So we start heading towards the camp. I'm on the back one of the 4-wheelers. And that guy that I rattled the buck up for came in a Suburban with another friend, and they had that buck tied up on the top on the luggage rack. And he goes, "Hey, there's that guy that rattled him up and gutted him for me." Well, then they knew I was telling the truth about that, so they were like, "He's telling the truth about that." And you could just see their minds wondering, "Wonder if he really killed all them big deer he said he did." So we got to a fork in the road, and the 3 of them said, "We're going up here and check for tracks where we're going to hunt tomorrow." The other one said, "Yeah, we're going over here up this clear cut, and we're going to look for tracks there." I said, "All right, thanks for the ride." So I started walking and walked about 100 yards. I said, "I'm going to get something to drink." So I got my backpack off and started. I forgot to say one thing, though. They hit a tree down over the road on purpose. I think they got jealous of me, and they hit this tree without slowing down on it, and it threw me off that 4-wheeler. If I hadn't had my backpack on, I'd probably been hurt. But I got up, shook it off. I could see them winking at each other, smiling. They did it on purpose. So when we split up, I walked up about 100 and got me a drink out, started sipping on it. They didn't go very far up that clear cut, turn around and come back. And when they come back by me at an angle, they're about 100 yards, but it's glass still right at dark. And I heard one of them say, "Well, there goes that guy." He said, "You reckon he really killed all them big deer he said he did?" And the other one said, hell no, that's the linest son of a bitch you'll ever meet in your life.
Little did they know,
So,
eh?
right, but they were from Houston. So when I was at the Houston, Texas Trophy Hunter Show, I thought I might run into one of them that figured out who I was, but I didn't. But it could happen in the future. But that was pretty funny.
Definitely. So, what's the biggest deer you've seen on the ranch?
Well, I actually saw my biggest deer, non-typical buck. He had 6 forks on a 12 or more frame, extremely massive. He looked like something that come out of Canada, but it was over in LaSalle County at Encinal. He was on the Red Nunley Ranch, a completely different ranch than I hunted most of the time. And, walking a little creek with this young kid and 8-point jump down in the bottom of the gully and the gulch and stuck a landing on the rim on the top and look over his shoulder. And I looked where he was looking back at, and I saw a doe. And I was watching that doe. We just both come to a stop, and my buddy never saw the buck I saw, but behind the doe, I could see like a double ear. It looked like 2 ears lined up where you could just see about 1 inch outline around the other. I've told this story lately, and I remember now seeing that double ear. It fascinated me. I was like, what the heck's that about? But right about that time, the whole mesquite tree started moving. His head and rack were up in the mesquite overhanging limbs, and I saw him. And he was easily, looking back now with all my years of experience, he was easily a 220 deer. I've seen bucks in the Big Rack book that, no bigger than him. He was huge. And he turned and ran down. His rack was sticking up above her back as he ran. And he hobbled, 3 or 4 yards, stopped at an overhanging low limb, ducked his rack underneath. He couldn't even get under that limb without stopping, and then he did it again about 2 or 3 yards later. And I just froze. I just dropped my jaw and was looking at him. I could not believe how big that deer was. I should have been throwing up trying to get off a shot. He was in the clear while he hobbled and stopped those 2 times. But I just wasn't an experienced enough hunter. It happened about the second year I was down there outlaw hunting. I had no idea I was going to see a deer that big. And to tell you the truth, it was just pure case of buck fever. I just froze up instead of trying to throw up and get off a shot. But I turned to my buddy and I said, did you see that buck? He said, I saw that little 8-point jump the creek. I said, no, behind that doe was a monster. And he goes, no, I didn't see it. I said, he run off. I just ducked at him. I couldn't think to shoot. I mean, he was a monster, period. He go way in the book non-typical.
Wow.
And that was the biggest deer I've ever seen on any of my hunts.
You never seen him again?
No, that heavy brush over there. And then that kid and another kid went back around Thanksgiving and got caught in there. They got tracked down and got caught. And so when I got back down there from Fort Worth, I've been up here for Thanksgiving, I heard they got caught, and I wasn't going in there. That pasture was hot. It's about a 20,000-acre pasture. And I said, I'm not going to go back. They're tracking people in there like that, So I didn't ever even try to go find that deer again.
Yeah. Did the law ever give you? Did they hassle you much when they, when you're just out and about? They bumped you? Because they must have known who you were.
Yeah, they knew all about me the whole time, but they didn't have any opportunities to encounter me. As much dove hunting as I did down there with my buddy Pat, I'm real surprised some of them wardens. We saw wardens drive by those county roads where we were bird hunting, and we were right out there in some low, cut maize and whatnot, and I'm surprised they would just blow on by and go somewhere else. They were heading somewhere. And they didn't stop and check us or nothing. But we were shooting over the limit on dove all the time down there, just nearly every evening. But they never had checked me. I don't know if I wrote this one story, but it's a funny one. The first year down there, we couldn't wait to shoot some ducks and stuff, so we went to this Salt Creek there that bordered the King Ranch out, to the east side of 77. And we got stuck in the mud going down in there before daylight, so we thought, well, what the hell, we'll worry about getting unstuck after we hunt. So we shot some teal, we shot some black-bellied tree ducks that weren't supposed to be shot, and then this one buddy of mine shot a big old pelican. I didn't ever, tell the story on that because I told him, I said, you go down there and bury that thing, that's prison. Well, we'd shot these black-bellied tree ducks and some little wading birds just for target practice, and a couple of them were in the high grass. And so my buddy said, well, I better go to town, hitchhike in, and get a ride, get somebody out here to help us. We didn't have no cell phones back then in 76, 77. Well, he gets a ride. A guy picks him up, and as soon as he gets on 77, a blazer comes up beside him with a winch on it. Well, he flags them down. It's 5 game wardens. It's actually 4 wardens in uniform and Mac Doodle, King Ranch Chief Security. And he says, hey, me and my buddies are duck hunting down Salt Creek. Anyway, I could talk you into, we'll pay you to come down there and pull us out with your winch. I said, sure, we'll pull you out. He said it wasn't until they got there and got out of that blazer they were in that he realized they were uniformed game wardens. He had seen the driver, which was Mac. Well, they pulled us out. They got me for shooting them 2 little wading birds because my buddy told them I shot them when they confronted him about it. And got Steve for one violation, a plug. He'd come with a shotgun he just bought and it didn't have a plug. Well, they got him for no plug, and they got Fred for one of them black-bellied tree ducks. But that was the first hunt we made in that area for anything. And we met the 4 top-named game wardens. It's like Cliff Schaefer, Kenneth Richardson. He's the one that poached the big deer in the King Ranch Refuge and was fired later. But I can't think of a couple of the others, but Mac Doodle, the King Ranch Chief of Security, and it might come to me later who them other wardens were. I don't remember if I wrote that in part 1 or not. See, the illness kept me from ever even proofreading what I wrote. There's stories that I don't have in there, I'll bet. I never proofread it. And by reading back through it, I would have remembered things that I left out too. I've got a plan in the future to, once I get part 2, I'm going to go back through part 1 and I'm going to get everything in there that I've left out and stuff that's of any value and put it in there because I've had some funny shit happen. And that's one of the stories I feel like for sure I did not write that. I'm not sure about it, but I may have. I don't think I put that in there.
No, I don't remember it, but it's a good story.
Yeah. So we paid our fines. What it amounted to, total, Fred got a 35 or 37.50 fine. I got a 27.50 fine. The Coop got a 27.50 fine. So for around $90, we got a record fee to pull us out. Yeah, worked out about the same,
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about these cops that they got you back into outlawing, because there was 6 years when you had you cleaned it up.
Yeah. They had me mount some bear rugs, some other heads and stuff, small stuff, some birds, and I knew them pretty well. I just knew they were sincere, men that loved to hunt that were cops. They didn't hold my past against me. They really enjoyed seeing my big old deer. But until I went through that bad divorce and was free, they never had any inkling about asking me to take them or, tell them where to go or nothing. They wouldn't have went by themselves without a guide that really knew the way around in there and knew how to get away with it. But once I was clear and free from the divorce, when that next hunting season came, I'd gotten real fit again. And everybody, all my friends were like, he's going to go back to it. They could just feel it. And so they were watching me, all eyes on me, would I stay straight or would I go back to outlaw hunting? I had no intentions of doing it. But then here comes that first cop one day in there, and I had this 141-inch heavy horn Palapena County buck, and he got all fired up. And deer were starting to rut here in Texas. And my buddy George, the day before, had just gone, and he called me and told me, he said, I rattled up 14 bucks for my nephew yesterday. They're telling the horn's good. So when I told the cop that, he got real fired up. About that time, my buddy Big L come in, and he said, let me take you over to my house and show you my head. So he takes this cop over to his house and shows him his 9 monsters he killed in the Kennedy while I wasn't poaching. And he came back and he goes, you got to take me, CB. And I'd already told him no, but he kept saying, I've got 2 days off right now. And I said, we can't go down there and back in 2 days. We need at least 4 days. And he goes, just give me a minute. I'm going to go talk to my chief. Well, he goes and talks to his chief. He leaves my shop in the squad car and uniform. He comes back in about an hour, plain clothes, brand new big red truck that he just bought days before with paper plates on it. His girlfriend had his regular truck he was going to trade in, but he hadn't exchanged that yet. And so we go in his brand new big red truck. We drove all night to get there. We got kicked out about 3 a.m. We walked 12 miles deep by daylight, and he said, I got to take a nap. I said, well, let me rattle one time before you decide whether you're going to take a nap or not. And so I beat the bone, and 3 bucks came running in and a cow, and he goes, fuck it, let's hunt. So, before the end of the first day, he shot a 20-inch inside spread, 10-point with 157-inch on the score. But, that was what he wanted. He said, if you can get me a 20-inch spread, 10-point, I'll go. And that's what he got. And then I come back with him. We get stopped by Highway Patrol coming in. And then, of course, when he pulled the barriers, they let us go. They'd seen that no front license plate when we come up behind them. Well, we get back to town there, and he goes, now, listen, I don't know if I can tell my partner or not. He said, we're real close friends, but he's by the book. I said, it's your call. I'm going to tell anybody. So I get in my taxidermy after he left, big photo op with my buddy Super Coop sniffing me out in the parking lot. He was waiting on us when we drove up. But anyway, that phone rings. I recognized the voice. It was the second cop. And he said, is this the world's greatest whitetail deer guide? I said, you got him. He said, you got to take me too, man. I've seen the bone. He said, I've seen the wood pile. You got to take me. So I take him next, and we go on a 4-day hunt. And he kills a 174 Pope and Young deer with his longbow. Rattled it up at 8 yards or less, probably 7 yards, and shot him right in the throat. He wheeled as he stuck him, and blood burst everywhere. That cedar air scattered. I mean, it was just, the hunt of all lifetime for him, a dream hunt of dream hunts. And he killed another freaky deer and crippled up a couple others. He was having fun with that longbow in there. But both of them, I rattled up over $100 for both of them. They'd never seen nothing like it.
Wow.
And they would never, they never intended to go again, just that one-time deal. But it was funny. I was trying to figure out how they had so much pull with the chief to get the extra days off. And when I got in there with the second cop, he told me a story on the chief and him. And then I knew what had happened. The chief was an outlaw. The chief was an outlaw fisherman with a second cop. They went down to this Squaw Creek Lake that's right near here where I'm at with the nuclear reactors and all. It's got a power plant there. And the lake was not even open yet. They were still in the stocking time allotment, where they stocked it heavy and it was not full yet, and they weren't letting anybody fish. Well, this chief and him were riding 10-speed bikes, carrying inner tubes and scuba flippers, and they were going in that lake before it was even open. They'd been in there several times and got away with it, but this game warden cornered them one day, and he came up on the other side of the bank from where they were going to have to make their exit, And so that's where the game warden messed up. He should have went around the lake and come in where they had their bikes hid and everything. So he said, all right, I got y'all. Y'all come on over here now. He said, what do we do? And he said, just start swimming slow to the bank. And, I mean, they had stringers, 8, 10-pound bass. That old chief said, nope. He said, I tell you what, we're going to chalk this one up to experience and we won't be back. And he pulled a cigar out of his shirt pocket, unwrapped the plastic wrapper, bit the end off of it, fired it up, started blowing smoke rings, and he said, you better get over here, you blammity, blam, blam, blam. He goes, no, you're not going to shoot anybody overfishing. He said, the way I figured, he said, we'll be halfway back to Mineral Wells time you get around to this side of the lake. And he cussed them up real good again, and then they just started moving towards the bank slow and walked up over the bank. When he got to the other side in the gully, he said, run. He said, why didn't you say run to start with? He said, I wasn't giving that game warden the satisfaction of seeing me run. But he was the chief of police there in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex.
Wow.
So that just goes to show you, there ain't no line drawn in the sand on who will poach a deer or a fish or whatever, That's just like this old game warden told me once. He served a warrant on me and my girlfriend for an antelope. And he said, there ain't no line drawn in the sand on who will shoot a deer poaching or not. He said, I've caught bankers, doctors, lawyers, preachers. I said, have you caught the Pope? He said, no, but I'm looking for him.
Oh, that's funny.
We're all tempted, But, yeah.
So do you think it was the hunting the deer or just breaking the law, the thrill of getting caught that drove you the most?
Well, it was born out of a love for wanting to kill a big deer, and I got engulfed in that. But as I got better and better at it, and I saw that I had the upper hand, that I'd come out there disappointed sometimes if I didn't have some heat, to make it funny. Because when they put up the helicopters, I'd laugh. I mean, I stayed fit, my whole life. I could run 4 or 5 miles the minute I heard them pulling trailers in there with choppers on them, and I'd already be 2, 3 miles away by the time they got them in the air. And I'd just start laughing my ass off. In fact, we get 4 miles on them, we'd start hunting again. They'd be down there just burning up, mowing the brush with them helicopters, and we'd be 4 miles away hunting again, laughing at them. Yeah, hot pursuit. I love it, But that wasn't why we went. We went in there to kill the big deer, but when the shit hit the fan, it was interesting, to say the least, but entertaining. But
I bet. I can imagine.
That was fun. I had a buddy with me who was real nervous one time, and a helicopter came on us, but I could tell it was a gauger heading out to some wells. And I said, "Here, hold my rattling horns." He said, "We're not going to run and hide." And I said, "Not this time." He said, "Why not?" And I dropped my overalls I had on and mooned the helicopter as he went by, and he goes, "You're crazy, motherfucker, Cherokee." Yeah.
You are, no doubt.
Just one of them. Yeah, one of them well workers. I mooned him.
Oh, that's funny. That's quite the career of chasing deer, man.
Yeah, it was double the fun being an outlaw, but that wasn't why I started doing it. I was after a big deer, and I couldn't get one. I couldn't get an invite on the politics. At that time, when I first went down there for the first 7 years, the King Ranch didn't even sell hunts. It was, an invite or nothing. So it wasn't about me working, saving some money, and paying for a hunt. You couldn't pay to hunt. I had some day lease hunting. We did. Me and my buddy Super Coop did some day lease hunting up in Dimmitt County the first season we were there. And then the next year I went outlaw. But, hunting those day leases and stuff is just bullshit. You're not going to kill nothing on them shot out places like that. It's just a rip off. But, the politics kept me from having any chance to hunt the King Ranch. So when I went outlaw, there was no turning back. I saw it as the only way I could do it. I couldn't afford a giant fee, but, I would have tried to do that if that was available. But there was no hunting available for any amount of money to anyone at that time.
Really?
Yeah, they got to hurting over a bunch of gas and oil bottom outs and cattle dropped, and they tried diversifying into agriculture, and that fell out, and they spent a lot of money on that and cleared a lot of brush. Now they're wishing they'd have left all that brush alone with all them deer in it, because they eventually had to start selling their deer herd. And now that's primarily what they do. My buddy Pat in his book talks about that. He circled the whole King Ranch the other day, and he didn't see one bull, one Sangatutus anywhere. He said they're just keeping their, tax write-off on the cattle and selling those big deer for, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000.
Oh, through hunting.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. The hunting saved them.
Huh. That's crazy. Yeah, it's just...
that's Texas.
Yeah, well, up here in our province, British Columbia, we have 94% of our province is public land. So, we have basically unlimited hunting opportunities. So, yeah, it's interesting to hear stories like that. Yeah,
it's sort of a dictatorship. It's gone completely out of control. The landowners, took over. Pat's got the dates and the details, but it was something like this. When it starts out, we were understanding as Texans that the deer, and according to the Constitution, belong to the citizens of the state, of each state. Okay, if you're a Texan, you got a right to fill your tags. Well, then it started being charged ridiculous rates, as people wanted to do it more and more. They saw a market, and these breeders started bringing in the big deer and pen raising them and selling them for exuberant prices. And then the hunters come out of the city, them city slickers, shoot them big deer and lie about it, say it was a real hunt when it was nothing but a 100-acre canned trap. And, it escalated from that to, like I said, the big remaining unhunted properties. They got to hurting on the cattle market in gas and oil, and they began to sell the deer because the value of them had come up so high. But it was like 1983, I think, that Pat said that the deer were declared by the Parks and Wildlife as property of the landowners. No longer they did belong to the citizens of the state. They belonged to the landowner. Okay? They trumped that years later with all this high fence stuff going on, and they bust these guys hauling whitetail out of season, buying and selling. they can't take possession of them. But they say that the minute they release a load of white-tailed deer into a property to stock it, those deer become property of the state, even though they bought them like livestock. Now, it's so screwed up now, who's right and who's wrong? It's just completely out of control.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of modern-day carpetbaggers selling and making money off these people's love for hunting. It's sort of like extortion.
It sounds like
I
a
hate
hot
to see
mess
what it's
to
come.
me.
Yeah, I hate to see what it's come to. And if you want a real outline on it, it's like this founder of a book called Big Rack. I won't even say his name, but he was big down there in deep South Texas and studied the Muy Grande contest every year. And for the 50 years that he was a professional legal guide, not one deer was killed over 250 inches that was entered in the Muy Grande contest. And then all of a sudden now they're getting a half a dozen to a dozen a year. And he told the owner of that place there in Freer, he said, not one was killed in 50 years I've been down here, and now you're telling me there's no tag holes and no tags in these 300, 400-inch deer coming in here? He said, bullshit. He knew better than believe that shit. So
Shady.
it's ruined, But
pretty shady.
they kill these 300 and something inch deer every year down there now.
Huh.
It's nothing to be proud of to me. I mean, I outlawed my deer. There's some shame in that game, I guess. But I didn't look at it that way back then. I looked at it like I was taking those deer between me and God. George used to say that. He said, what a man does in that ranch is between him and God. It's a shame it's gotten to where it is. It's just out of control.
So you must have a good collection of trophies, whitetail trophies.
Part of my story is when I quit poaching for 6 years, I turned in what I had killed to that point, minus a few that I'd borrowed some money against. So when I went back to the poaching, it was like starting all over. And most of the really big ones, I'd let my friends kill. And my buddies would say, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? They said, you got a reputation for being the one that always kills the biggest deer. And I said, well, I've got a new reputation now. I'm the one that's known for letting all my buddies kill the big one now.
Yeah, they must have liked that.
I enjoyed making their dream come true. That meant more than killing one myself. I'd already killed so many,
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about your hunt leading up to when you got busted.
Well, there is some stuff involved in that. I'd grown tired of the poaching, like I said, and that January, I was in the Pelon field over there in the brush and by myself, mock bottom boots, track free, climbed a tree, and I was trying to get a view on where I wanted to go next. I heard some voices on the radio and a squelch, static, and I thought, uh-oh, somebody could be seeing me from up here. So I got out of that tree real quick, saddled up my backpack again and started running. And I was in thick brush, and I ran across a sendero I didn't know was there, and I could hear a truck coming by then, and it was coming right down that sendero right at me. And, I ran across it at that point. I had no choice, and they saw me, a couple hundred yards from me. Well, I got up in this real thick brush within 100 yards, and I got so thick I stalled out in it and hung up in it. I got snagged up, couldn't hardly move. I had to fight my way out of that, but I was kind of laughing to myself, and I was thinking, welcome to the big leagues, boys. I knew they weren't going to be able to track me, and I heard the Spirit of God say, you will be caught this year. And I said, right, they're going to catch the king. And he said, you will be caught this year. So 2 weeks later, I'm in the Kennedy on this unlimited hunt. It's going to be about 3 weeks, is what I figured. They caught me on the third evening, but I'd been sitting at this spot watching my back trail for about 2 hours, and then I got up, went back over there to my pack, and all the sun was just about 10 minutes from hitting the horizon going down. I was going to cross this big prairie 4 miles to the west to this other brush and start hunting there the next day. And I was out of water and was going to get water right there at the windmill, but I said, no, I'm going to wait and get it over there at the Parita. So I watched my back trail for 2 hours. Well, the game wardens had been so close on my trail, they crossed right behind me. I'd made one rattle about 200 yards from there and rattled up a pretty nice buck, took his picture, and then fixed to move, after 2 hours of watching my back trail. And I heard some steps below me. And I ain't kidding you. I knew it was human footsteps. I've been listening to my footsteps in that ranch 20 years. I know what they sound like on them leaves, and I got spooked. I got up, tiptoed over there about 10 yards, and looked down in that bottom, and it's about 30 feet down into that oak bottom, and I didn't see nothing, but I heard about 2 or 3 footsteps leaving out to my right about 30 yards, and I went, well, I guess it was a nail guy or something, but it spooked me. I knew it sounded more like human footprints. So I got back over there, and I picked my backpack up, put it on my shoulder. I was going to move. I mean, my instincts kicked in, and I said, get in the brush, get in the brush. I heard it twice. And I'd always follow my instincts like that, and it saved me a few times. Well, I heard the Spirit of God say, just sit back down 10 more minutes. And I thought, well, I need about 10 minutes before it's safe to go out in that clearing and get the sun off of me. And so I thought he was trying to help me. Well, he was trying to help get me caught. I sat back down, and I hadn't been sitting down 5 minutes, and I had a little candy bar to get a little energy to cross that prairie on, and got a dip going. As soon as I got that dip Copenhagen going, I hear, there he is, right there. Get your hands up. And I mean, I turned around, come up on one knee, and there was 8 men in a wall 18 yards from me. They just topped that hill right on me. They had gave up. They were going to, regroup and circle the brush and take the easy path out. But that's what led them right to me, was getting outside of that thick brush. And they ran right up to me in just like 2.3 seconds. And they had 5 pistols stuck to my head. Don't move. And rolled me over and handcuffed me. And I mean, it went down so quick, I had no chance at all to try to make a break and run. And they finally stood me up. When they stood me up, I heard the Spirit of God again. He said, I told you you would be caught this year. Well, that happened. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm in his hands now, and he's going to show me the plan he has for me, because I told him that summer in another prayer fishing on the river, I said, whatever plan you said you've had for me, I said, let's get on with it. I'm tired of the outlaw hunting. If I got to give it up, I'll give it up. And so step 1, my arrest and capture. But now with part 1 out and part 2 on the way, my testimony that he wants me to give is in part 2. And I think that's the reason he's brought it forward in 2 parts, because he didn't want part 2 out yet. It's too strong. Nobody could receive it. And so when I built this, foundation for the last 4 years, some credibility, and people know I'm not some quack, when I come on with the nukes in part 2, they're going to understand this guy's not making this shit up. This really happened. And I mean, it's just an unbelievable testimony for God. And I never understood why it happened in the first place. And I didn't understand why it's been so long for me to have an opportunity to, tell everybody. But that's what this is. My story is just my microphone to give me the opportunity to share my testimony. And it's unbelievable. It's just going to shock the whole nation. It's that big. But I can't say anything about it without giving it away. But it's coming. I think I'll have it done certainly with 3 more months. It'll be out.
Yeah, well, we're going to look forward to that. These guys who made the arrest, they must took that as quite the victory. Yeah,
in fact, we're walking back to the truck. They didn't even know where their buddies were that had the truck in the pasture close, and so they said, where these windmills are and everything? I said, yeah. And they said, listen to what they say. We're going to have them tell us where they're at. So they got on the radio, and those guys described this northwest fence line they were on that came off that east-west fence from the windmill, and I knew exactly where they were talking about. And he said, you know where they're talking about? And I said, yeah. He said, point at them. I took a step to the northeast and pointed with my nose, I was handcuffed. And he looked at the arrow on his GPS, and he said, he's pointing right at them. He said, will you take us to him? And I said, yeah. He said, stay right there. The man knows where you're at. He's bringing us to you. So I kept having to fight them wanting to stay out in the open and, stay out of the brush. And I said, boys, we need to cut back. You're heading the wrong way. Well, we finally get pretty close. And he said, have them pop a shot. They popped a shot. We weren't 75 yards from them, heading right at them. And this head game ward, Mike Fain, he just couldn't contain himself anymore. He was, really overcharged with having finally caught me. And he whipped his pistol out and fired a shot back at him right in my ear. I got mad because there wasn't no sense in him being that careless. I understood him being kind of, happy and all, but there wasn't no point in him firing a shot without warning me, And so I kind of soiled up and stopped and got mad at him there for a minute. But as I began to walk on, I heard God say, he said, you're quite a trophy for these guys, Charlie. So I guess that's what it was. He just couldn't contain his joy, He was overwhelmed.
Yeah, well, quite the run you had.
Yeah.
So,
22-year span.
Yeah, when the hammer came down, what were the charges they threw at you?
I got charged with hunting without consent of landowner. That was the big one. And hunting out of season, because it was February. Season been closed about 3 weeks. So in penalty and fine and all, it cost me $1,700 to bond out. And, I never did any jail time. The bondsman came bonding me right out. And the next morning, they actually met me for breakfast and bought me breakfast, and gave me my wallet and my keys and stuff. They wanted to hear me tell them some hunting stories, and I did. And that was kind of funny. But anyway, they ended up fining me $500 and cost the court $250, 18 months probation, suspension of hunting and fishing license, both. That's what hurt. I shouldn't have told them I loved to hunt. Loved to fish as much as I love to hunt. And then they wouldn't have added that to my penalty. But, that hurt worse than losing out on hunting for a year and a half, not getting to fish. That, I love fishing more than hunting. But anyway, the whole scene there at that red barn in that Revere, little town in Revere there on the north end of the Kennedy, that's where I ate breakfast with them. And I told them about, being out here at DFW Airport on my 20-year class reunion and, getting PI'd, blew a couple tires hitting the curb, got PI'd. When they let me out, I bonded out in the middle of the night. Well, it was about 4 or 5, and I had just enough time, I felt like, to get to my Cadillac at the north entrance, and I left it parked there locked up, and put on a spare and limp into Grapevine and get me another tire. And so that was my plan. But when I got north to the dead end, I couldn't get around the runways. So I said, I'm just going to cross these damn runways. So that's what I did. Well, it's funny because the gamers were looking at each other like, where's he going with this story? So I backed up with them golf cleats on and ran into that 6-foot cyclone fence. Didn't have a stay bar at the top, and it just flexed over, and I just climbed right up it and went over. I remember now, after telling this a lot lately, I met a jet head on immediately, and I took a knee. And he watched me, looked at me, he saw me. He called the tower and turned me in. Well, when he passed and turned around and took off, I took off. And I would run between these runways and hit the deck spread eagle. Here came 2 trucks with spotlights and headlights coming up the runway at me. And they'd go by me, and I'd break and run behind the trucks, hit the next median. Here come the other one coming back the other way. I made it across all 4 major runways and all the taxi roads and climbed the fence on the other side, made it to my old Cadillac, put that spare on, and hobbled in on the rim to Grapevine. Bought a tire when Goodyear opened at 7 in the morning and made it on time for a breakfast appointment with my mother and my brother's son. But, they were, at the end of that, they were like, well, tell us a hunting story. Tell us a hunting story, Charlie. I said, all right. So I told them about that last hunt, the contest winner, day 1, when I blew it on a 30-inch spread, saw a Boone and Crockett typical over 190, no question about it. 2 other really good deer. And, I shot at the back of one's neck that I'd rattled up after waiting all day on that 30-inch spread to kill him. And I had no idea that Boone and Crockett was even that big. And so when I shot, he turned his head just as I squeezed off, and I blew one earbud plumb off the left side of his head. And I got mad that I'd missed him, and the shot was so loud, and I just, clenched up. I just cringed, and I was saying, damn, that shot was loud. Damn, I missed. And I just froze. My plan was to go ahead and shoot that buck, run out there and kill the 30-inch buck I'd waited on all day, about 350 yards from me down in that draw valley. And while I'm sitting there froze up, the wide one, the 30-inch buck, runs in on me, just right in on the oak leaves in that oak motte. And I said, I got to shoot him. Well, I raised up, and I'm just so clenched up, I'm not thinking clear. So mad and everything. And I squeezed off on his shoulder, nothing happened. I thought that I was having a problem with the reloads. This guy gave me some reloads, and I thought something was wrong with the primers. It wasn't firing. I said, discharge, misfire. And so I rechambered another shell real slow and did it again. He's 20 yards from me. I'm squeezing off on him. He looks like he's got 2 arms sticking straight out. He was 30-something inches easy. And so I realized at that point, I went, you left your safety back on. When I re-chambered that shell after missing that one, blew his ear off, I put the safety back on. So I just said, you left your safety on. He pulled up behind some heavy brush and stopped 30 yards. I shot through the brush. He took off, crashed about 20 yards, and was down on his knees, heaving and choking and gagging. And I went, I got him. I got the 30-inch spread buck. And so I was, real happy at the moment. And then here comes this black 150 buck that I'd seen down there 500 yards all day long with the other two. And he danced right on through. And then here come this mule deer looking buck, real square, tall, 15-inch back tines. And he had black velvet covered still, about 3 or 4 inch handlebars on both back tines, way up high. He would have gone Boone and Crockett, I believe, but those handlebars would have probably kept him back out of the book. Well, at that point, this Jeep's coming in on me. I'd heard him crank after, down in the 30-inch buck. Well, I got them pouring in on me. They're getting closer and closer and closer in the rough coming up at me. And that buck's standing there looking big enough to go ahead and shoot him too. But I said, I can't shoot that deer. They're coming right in on me. They're going to pinpoint me. And then here comes the one I'd known least about all day. And he was over 20 points typical. I'm not kidding you. Nothing on his rack was less than probably 8 or 9 inches long at the front and back. But he had 10-inch eye guards, and he had perfect typical rack. I think he could have had 24 points. I couldn't count them. They were so close together. The beam was real palmated, and the points were so close together they looked just like your fingers on your hands. Hold both your hands up beside each other, front to back, and that's what it looked like. And he was around 20-inch spread, probably 19 inside. But he comes in, and I said, I can't shoot that deer. They're 200 yards from me, blowing wide open in on me. So the Jeep comes within 30 yards of the motor less and stops. And when he cut the motor, I could hear the fan blade turning on the motor after he cut it off. That's how close they were. And that buck moved up 2 or 3 more times, but he stopped still in view, about 35 yards from me. And all of a sudden, I went into this trance. I forgot the Jeep was parked outside the mott. And so I said, shoot that deer. My spirit was talking loud. I said, shoot the deer. And so I got a couple steps up, leaned on a live oak tree and got steady and got on the back of his neck. And I started squeezing, and the weight came out of that trigger. It collapsed, and when it did, I caught myself, and I said, I can't shoot that deer. They're right outside the mott on me. I'm going to get my ass caught. I've got to get my shit together. So I put it back on safety and got in this cat claw and put my little camo gloves on, covered my face, and stood there till pitch dark. And they didn't crank for like 30 minutes after dark. They must have been out on foot walking around, or they must have been, and what saved me probably was every time I'd go out there and check that 30-inch buck all day, I'd brush my tracks with a limb. So that kept them from being able to track me into that mott. So they were just watching that surrounding open country, hoping someone would get up and show themselves where they could see them and get after them. But I was afraid to even piss and make any noise at all. So I just crawled straight in my sleep bag. I said, I'm going to, sleep and get up when I need to pee about 3 or so in the morning. I'm going to find that 30-inch spread and cape him off and get the fuck out of here. I knew Tom East was going to be bringing the helicopters, and he did. And so what happened was the next morning I was still jogging back and forth, looking everywhere. I burned my flashlight, plumb up, looking for that deer. I could not find any sign of him, no blood, no nothing. He got up and left. I was just sick. So I let it get light where I could see good enough in daylight to make sure he wasn't there somewhere in a thick spot. I had missed him, and I didn't see him at all. And so they got the first helicopter up. When they did, it circled that oak mott and came through a valley of dead mesquite, looked like it'd been sprayed, defoliated. And I started running out across that, and I got about 200 yards out in it, needed about 300 more to get to the live oak on the other side. And that helicopter beelines me. As he's coming at me, right on the treetops, I see this one native big old heavy trunk mesquite-covered ivy. Man, I'm taking full-length strides, gun, bow, backpack, and everything, just running wide open. And as I'm getting closer and closer, the helicopter's getting closer and closer to me. Right at the last second, I dove in, turned my back, bounced off that big tree full of ivy, shoved myself right back up against it, and over the top of the tree. I jumped up, took off running again. I didn't stop running for 4 miles. And I mean, they put up 5 to 7 helicopters, and they were burning the brush down. And about dark that night, I killed a 14-point, 160-something inch buck. And, that made it feel a little better. But I was so mad, so disheartened for blowing it so bad. That was the best opportunity I've ever had in all the years of my outlaw hunting. And I butchered it, just blew it. And it just shouldn't have happened that way. You know, if I'd have killed those deer, any of them, I'd have been back in Fort Worth that next day, drunk, celebrating. But I told the game wardens that story, and then I said, when I got back to Fort Worth, it was an 11-day hunt, but I killed a 180 9 days later, and that was a good one. That won the contest I was in that year. But when I told my buddy Big L what had happened, he said, you should have shot that deer and everybody else that came running into the mott, and the game wardens died laughing. Yeah, I think they understood.
Yeah, that's quite a story, man.
So, yeah, Big L was right.
These ranches, they ever try to get a hold of you? They ever try to seek restitution for these deer?
No, they didn't. They didn't ever try to file any kind of charges of that. See, back then we didn't have restitution. When I turned in those heads and admitted guilt on them, there was no restitution laws. They fell in place years later. You know, been a different story now. You know, certainly if they would have had me with a big deer when they caught me, I would have had to pay restitution. And it would have probably been, you know, the buck I missed the evening before in a real strong wind, but not holding on his hip. I held about the last rib instead at 300 yards, and I missed this 180-something buck. He was pushing 190 with, you know, stickers and forks everywhere up at the top. Real long, foot-long eye guards, wiggly, dick, dastardly looking rack, black horns. I was in an area called the Moto Negra when I got caught. Well, that means black mott's. And the trees there, the bark is the color of charcoal. And that's how those deer rub and have black horns in that area. It's unlike any place in the whole ranch. You don't see that color of bark anywhere else in the whole Kennedy Ranch. That's why they named it Moto Negra. Well, you know, that was where they caught me. And, you know, after missing that deer, staying in that area that third day, looking for him again. And that group of bucks, he was with 9 other bucks. I looked for them bucks all day that day, made a big 3.5, 4 mile circle. That's one of the reasons it took the game wardens till dark to come back to where I was. But what was funny, there was a bunch of outlaw drunks, fishermen over there listening to the scanner, and they were trying to figure out who it was the game wardens were chasing, you know, all day long. And when they got on my tracks, they were talking, you know, we're over here now, we're over there now. He's covered all this ground. Well, there was a flooded area right there near where they caught me. But what happened was I walked right up to it, and I had stashed my backpack in some real heavy brush and walked those 3 or 4 miles that third day looking for that deer. So I was light on my feet. Well, I walked right up to that water, and it was about 30 yards across it, and it's about 50 yards long. And my pack was up in some brush on the other side of it. So what I did when I stopped at that water, I just leaned back in a couple of steps that I'd already made and took off. And I ran on the clump grass in that water, about 18-inch deep water, and hardly stirred the murk on it, you know, landing my ball of my foot on dead center of all them clump grasses and just ran across that water, got up there and just, you know, right up the heavy brush scenery, right into that live oak, went to the heavy thicket and found my backpack and moved from there about another 800 or 900 yards before they tracked to me and caught me. But the suckers had came to that water hole. They saw where I was, and the tracks just ended. And this one old man called Papa Smurf, this midget, his name was Charlie too, he was beating his head against the wall trying to figure out who the hell they were chasing. And it hadn't hit him yet, but one of them game wardens came on the scanner when they stalled out at the end of my tracks on that water hole, and he said, this guy's a professional. He comes right up to this water and the tracks just end. And it hit him. He'd seen me 3 nights before in this Sam's Place bar there at Loyola Beach. And he stood up in the middle of the room and he said, that's Charlie Beaty they're after over there. And sure enough, that's who it was. And about, you know, another 30 minutes later, they had me. I know it was 2 more hours before they got to me because they'd been right underneath me for a couple of hours. But yeah, he figured out, he remembered seeing me in town because, you know, I didn't live down there then. I would just show up and make my hunch. But, you know, yeah, it was something else the way it ended.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's quite a story at the courthouse, you know.
I bet.
There's quite a lot, you know, quite a bit went on there at the courthouse. They acted like they caught some space alien or Bigfoot. I mean, when they got me out of that truck, the ranch security's one that hauled me into town, and when he let me out of the truck, game wardens were taking a knee halfway to the courthouse in the parking lot, photographing me being escorted into the courthouse. it was ridiculous how big of an event they acted like it was. You know, of course, being after me 22 years, I guess it meant that much to them.
Yeah, I bet it did.
You know,
Crazy stuff, man. We're gonna look forward to part 2 coming out. It's coming out soon. I'd like to get you back on. Maybe once you get that book out, it'd be great to touch base and talk about part 2 of your book.
Yeah, no doubt.
So
no
where
doubt.
can guys buy your book?
On my website's www.princeofpoachers.com, and you know, I've got Christmas 3-packs for gifts available now, and you know, singles. You know, I do some autographed copies too for a little extra to cover my time, but I'm just Charlie Beaty. There's nothing special about me. I just love to hunt like everybody else.
And we can
too much.
You can pick it up on Amazon as well, I think, through Kindle, for those who can.
Right.
Who can't
Yeah,
wait.
that just went into place last night.
Perfect.
And you know, don't forget, while they're waiting on part 2, my buddy Pat Lane's book is www.beforethestoriesarlost.com, and I guarantee you it's a real education about down there, and he did a lot of the hunting I did. He's in some of my hunts, I'm in some of his. He was the road hunting king. He was trained by the masters. He knew all the old timers of generation prior that were never caught, but just gave the game wardens fits and stuff, and man, he's got some stories I don't have.
Yeah,
Anybody that
I'll have to pick that one
up.
up.
My book, if you like my book, you'll like his too. You know, it's quite an account of Deep South Texas.
Yeah, and I'll have links to your webpage, and I'll put a link up to that one too, where guys can check out what you got going on and pick up some of these books.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we got 2 books here we're going to give away. So,
cool.
I think what was the score of the biggest buck you ever took?
I brought a couple of 180s out of there.
180? Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
180.
So the first 2 people who write in and they tell me the name of the biggest buck you killed, we're gonna send them one of your books, and we're gonna add a little bit of swag in there too. So be a nice Christmas present for some people.
Oh yeah.
Okay, CB, thanks again, for taking some time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I should have told you that earlier. Most people that know me personally, that's what they call me, CB. I'm just CB. You know, it's in a lot of my stories that way.
Awesome. Okay, man. Well, you stay in touch.
Okay, thanks for having me.